Got a bit of Gemara for today on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. We got up to the Mishnah. Right? So we're going to start in a moment with the list of sponsors, and then we'll start in our text. Okay. Don't see Harvey this morning, or I don't see Ted. Hopefully they're okay, and will be joining us shortly. Oh, that's good. Who's sharing their screen? Or who just, Marvin, that was good.
What'd I do?
What? What did you do?
I don't know what I did.
Your camera focused on your text.
Oh.
Okay. It's particularly the notes on the diagram, opposite note 8 on 75A1.
Yeah.
Which we may refer to shortly.
Right.
All right, starting with our sponsors. Year of Learning, Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Ruven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Israel David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook. A week of learning, ending today, a spot by Sam and Shifra Coleman, in memory of his mother, Sarah Rachel Bas Avraham. Also a week of learning ending today by Leila and Siggy Bessler, in memory of her mother, Brendel Bas Yechiel, and a week of learning starting today by Michael and Sharon Glass, in memory of his father, Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yechiel Michal. We have today also a day of learning by Chuck and Shelley Orgel, in memory of his sister Tzipora bat Nasan Nita. Yesterday was also a day of learning by Milton Meller in honor of his wife Gail's birthday. Very nice. And that we say then Mazel Tov to Gail Miller, but may the Neshamas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia, Vet the Yeshua Shem Matzliah, Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gebench Yar. All right. We are starting now with the new Mishnah on Ayin Hey, okay, Amud Aleph. It's about 10 lines down. Okay. Now, you may remember that just briefly we've had examples, some stopping back, of a situation where we had two courtyards, one in front of the other, okay? And we had discussions about the fact of whether a Jew lived in the back courtyard and a Jew and Gentile lived in the front courtyard, or vice versa, things like that, okay? So we've come previously to see this issue of two courtyards, one in front and one in back. And now we're looking at this same situation, but from a slightly different perspective. Okay? So our Mishnah starts off. All right, Ayin Hey Amud Aleph Matniten. Shtei chatzerot zo v'lefnim mizo. Two courtyards, one in front of the other. Okay? Or one behind the other, however you want to. Irva hapnimit v'lo irva hachitzona. Okay? If the back or the inner courtyard came together for an eruv, right? But the front courtyard, okay, did not join together for an eruv. Mishnah continues, hapnimit muteret. Okay, then in that case, the residents of the back or inner courtyard are permitted to carry inside their courtyard. Vahachitzona asura. And the residents of the outer courtyard, or those residents from the inner courtyard wanting to get out and bring things through the outer courtyard, that's forbidden. Hachitzona. Okay, so now the Mishnah flips it. If the outer courtyard, okay, the one closer to the Reshus Harabim, okay, that had the petach to the Reshus Harabim, if that courtyard joined together for an eruv, okay, velo hapnimit, but the inner courtyard, okay, did not join together for an eruv, shtehen asurot, okay, both carrying in both courtyards is now prohibited. Okay, going on, irva zola atzma, v'zola atzma. Okay, if each of the two courtyards join together for separate, I'll say, eruvin, each one did their own. Okay, what happens? Zo muteret b'fnei atzma, v'zo muteret b'fnei atzma. This one is permitted to carry within its chatzer, and this one is permitted to carry in this chatzer. However, that is Tanakama, right? Rabbi Akiva says something different. Okay, he says, "Oser hachitzona." He prohibits then the carrying in the outer courtyard. On what basis? Shedrisat haregel osarta. Okay, namely that while it was permitted in the inner courtyard, based on their own eruv, since they're not part of the eruv of the outer courtyard, they are forbidden. Okay, so that's the implication. That's what's permitted in one could be forbidden or prohibited in the other. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say, ein drisat haregel osarta. The sages disagree with Rabbi Akiva, okay, and they say that the fact that those of the inner courtyard made their own eruv, even though they're not part of the eruv of the outer courtyard, nevertheless, since they have a rite of passage, right, to get from their inner courtyard through their opening, through the outer courtyard to get to the Reshus Harabim, they are permitted to do so. Now, continuing with our Mishnah. Shachach echad min hachitzona. Okay, what happens if one from the outer courtyard forgot to be joined in the eruv? Velo irev, okay, and he did not, right, join in that eruv. Hapnimit muteret. Those residents of the inner courtyard are still permitted to carry in the courtyard. Vachitzona asura. Okay, but the residents of the outer courtyard are forbidden to carry, right? Because the person forgot to join the eruv, But at the same time, our Mishnah doesn't say that the person relinquished their rights. Now we go on. Min hapnimit, if the person who forgot was part of a resident of the inner courtyard, velo irev, and therefore he did not join that eruv. Shtehen asurot. In that case, says our Mishnah, residents of both the inner courtyard as well as residents of the outer courtyard are prohibited from carrying. Now, going on, let's say the following. Natnu eruvan b'makom echad, says our Mishnah, that they put the joint eruv, in other words, both courtyards, instead of doing their separate or their own eruv, put it all together, and they put it in one place. Okay. Now, it's not clear what does it mean when we say they put it in one place. And
Where
so
would it
we'll
be?
have to see
Right.
if the Gemara addresses this issue. Okay. V'shachach echad. Okay. And one of the residents, bein min hapnimit, bein min chitzona, regardless of if he was a resident of the inner courtyard or of the outer courtyard, velo irev, and he did not join the eruv, shtehen asurot, then all the residents of, or I would say of both courtyards, are prohibited from carrying, not only in their respective courtyard, but in the other
Other one exposed.
courtyard. Ve'im hayu shel yichidim. Okay. However, says the Mishnah at this point, if they were individuals, in other words, if there was only single individuals and not multiple dwellings in each courtyard, einan srichim la'arev, the two individuals, one in the back courtyard, the one in the front courtyard, are not required to join in an eruv. Let's go on now to the Gemara. And it says, Ki ata Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, remember he would travel back and forth from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar Rabbi Yanai. Okay, what did he do? He said in the name of Rabbi Yanai, Zo divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, that the language of this Mishnah seems to reflect the view of Rabbi Akiva. Right? The Amar afilu regel hamuteret bimkoma oseret shalo bimkoma. Okay, so this clarifies the statement of Rabbi Akiva that even while the participant in the eruv in one place, in other words, in his courtyard, that is going to prohibit, okay, can prohibit people in the other courtyard. Aval chachamim omrim, but the sages say, kashem sheregel hamuteret eina oseret, the same way that the, let's say, permissive foot, okay, the resident of one courtyard doesn't prohibit, kach regel ha'asura eina oseret. So likewise, he says that the individual, okay, or the resident, let's say, okay, that may prohibit in his own courtyard would not prohibit in the other courtyard. Okay. Now, Tznan, and we have a Braita, or a Mishnah really, says the text, that seems to support this view. Irva chitzona velo pnimit. Okay, if they join in the eruv in an outer courtyard, but not the inner courtyard, shtehen asurot. Okay, carrying in both courtyards are prohibited.
Why?
Mani, according to whom? Ilema Rabbi Akiva. If we say this is according to Rabbi Akiva, my area regel asura, why do we have to say specifically that Rabbi Akiva is saying that this individual prohibits afilu regel muteret nami. Even then, if the person is permitted in his courtyard, according to this, he could still prohibit in the other courtyard. Lav Rabbanan. But rather this part of the Mishnah, therefore, has to be not the view of Rabbi Akiva, but the view of the rabbis. Gemara responds, Le'olam Rabbi Akiva. No, this seems also, to have to say that this part of the text also has to be according to Rabbi Akiva. And simply, V'lo zo af zo katani. But rather he was teaching in the style, of not only this, but this. That is the view, that the Gemara is suggesting. Now, going on, Tznan. Now we have another Mishnah, and this other Mishnah, is going to tell us, further information. Irva zo la'atzma v'zo la'atzma. Our Mishnah says further that if each of the chatzerot joined in their own eruv, what's the situation? Zo muteret b'fnei atzma. This one is permitted carrying in its location. V'zo muteret b'fnei atzma. And this one is permitted in its location. Tama de irva. The reason being that I'm going to say each joined in their own eruv.
Right.
Halo irva. But if they didn't join in an eruv, shtehen asurot. The implication would be each one of them, I'm going to say, or both, have prohibited carrying. Now, says our Gemara, Vaha haitnan. And here we have a Tana, the Amar regel hamuteret eina oseret. That it seems to be saying that the individual in one courtyard, does not prohibit carrying in another courtyard. Regel ha'asura, oseret. But when we say that the individual prohibits, the one who is prohibited in his courtyard prohibits in another courtyard, maniha, who is it? Right? Maniha. Ilema Rabbi Akiva, if we're going to say that that's the view of Rabbi Akiva, afilu regel hamuteret nami, then we would say even if the person the resident is permitted in his own, her own courtyard, that also should prohibit in the other courtyard. Lav Rabbananhi, but therefore must not this be the view of the rabbis? Va'od, and furthermore, midaseifa, since the end, we said, of the Mishnah seems to follow the view of Rabbi Akiva, Reisha Lav Rabbi Akiva, are we going to say, therefore, that the first part of the Mishnah is not according to Rabbi Akiva? Right? So what happens? Right? Kula Rabbi Akiva. Rather, we're going to say that the entire Mishnah is really the view of Rabbi Akiva. Right? V'chasuri michsara v'hachi katani. And rather, we're going to say something here is missing, and this is how we have to teach this Mishnah. Irva zo la'atzma v'zo la'atzma. This courtyard joined in eruv for itself, and this one for itself. Zo muteret b'fnei atzma, v'zo muteret b'fnei atzma. This one permits carrying for itself, and this one permits carrying for itself. B'med varim amurim, what are we talking about? She'asta daka. Why? Because the inner courtyard, I'm suggesting, made some sort of small partition, small gate, small something there, okay? And therefore they could close, okay? Looking back at that diagram, right? From 75A1, opposite note 8, that by closing that off, they have a separate area, and therefore they have no need to go through the outer chatzer, okay, and that's why. Aval lo asta daka, okay, but if they did not make some sort of small partition there, chitzona asura divrei Rabbi Akiva, then the outer partition is prohibited from carrying those, right, from the inner partition through the outer. Also, the people in the outer themselves are prohibited. That's the view of Rabbi Akiva. Sherebbi Akiva oser et hachitzona, because Rabbi Akiva prohibits residents in the outer courtyard from carrying, b'pnei shedrisat haregel oseret, because he holds that having that opening from the inner courtyard to the outer courtyard, residents of the inner courtyard have an impact on the residents of the outer courtyard. The Chachamim omri, but the sages, however, say as follows: Ein drisat haregel oseret, that the position, the status, the steps, okay, of the residents of the inner courtyard, have no impact, okay, does not impact or prohibit the residents of the outer courtyard. Now, we challenge this as follows, okay, with the following attempt to disagree with Rav Dimi's explanation. Meitiv Rav Bivi bar Abaye. So Rav Bivi bar Abaye is going to challenge this last ruling of this last Mishnah. V'im hayusha yechidim. But our Mishnah went on, okay, and specifically said that if there were individuals living in each of these courtyards, ein srichin la'arev, they are not required, they don't need to join in an eruv. Okay, this would seem to tell us that still you have two Jews together, but the Jew of living in the resident in the inner courtyard does not impact and therefore does not prohibit the Jew living in the outer courtyard, okay? Which disagrees with Rabbi Akiva's position, as Rav Dimi explained it. Ha sharabim tzrichin la'arev. But here, if you have multiple households in the courtyard, they are required to join in an eruv. Alma, therefore, regel hamuteret b'mkoma eina oseret. Okay, that's somebody who the residents where it's permitted in their chatzer, okay, do not prohibit elsewhere. Regel ha'asura oseret. But if they're prohibited in their, I'm going to say, own chatzer, then they're going to prohibit also in the other chatzer. Va'od meitiv Ravina. And furthermore, Rabina also raises a challenge to Rav Dimi, okay, from the Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, Shachach echad min hachitzona v'lo irev, that if one from the outer courtyard forgot and didn't join in the Eruv, hapnimit muteret, then those living in the inner courtyard are permitted. V'chitzona asura, but those living in the outer courtyard are prohibited. Shachach echad min hapnimit v'lo irev. If one living resident of the inner courtyard forgot and did not join the Eruv, shtehen asurot, then residents of both the inner courtyard and the outer courtyard are prohibited.
Why?
Tama, the reason, to shachach, because he forgot. And remember, we added that the person did not relinquish their rights. Right? Ha, lo shachach, which would imply if the person had not forgotten, shtehen mutarot, that in that case, carrying by residents in both courtyards is permitted. Okay? Alma, therefore, what do we have? Regel hamuteret eina oseret. Okay? That again, says Ravina, where somebody is permitted in their courtyard, it does not prohibit in the other one. Regel ha'asura oseret. But someone, a resident prohibited in their courtyard, does prohibit.
The other one.
Hela ki ata Ravin, says the Gemara. However, when Ravin comes from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, Hamar Rabbi Yanai, he says in the name of Rabbi Yanai, okay, Shalosh machlokot b'davar. There are actually three different positions, three different opinions on this three arguments, right? Number one, Tanakama Saval, Regil Hamuteret, Eino Aseret, Regil Ha'asura Oseret. Okay? Namely, the author of our Mishnah seems to imply that the individual living in one courtyard, which is permitted, does not prohibit in another. Where the per individual resident of one courtyard that is prohibited does prohibit in the other courtyard. Position number two, Rabbi Akiva Savar, afilu regil hamuteret oseret.
Why?
Namely, according to Rabbi Akiva, that even if the person, the resident, is permitted in one's own courtyard, it is going to prohibit in the other courtyard.
Why?
The Rabbanan and the rabbis, Batrai, these later rabbis, Savre kashem sheregel muteret, eina oseret, the same way that a resident permitted in his courtyard doesn't prohibit in the other courtyard. Kach regel ha'asura, so likewise, the resident that's prohibited, eina oseret, also doesn't prohibit in the other courtyard. Okay. Now, having said that, okay, we get to a new piece, a new statement. Okay? Yeah, from the Mishnah. Natnu eruvan b'makom echad. They put their eruv in one place. V'shachach echad bein min hapnimit. Okay, and one of the residents from the inner courtyard forgot, okay, to join the eruv. So the Gemara here focuses on our problematic phrase, Mai makom echad. What does it mean, one place? Okay, and what does it do? it now gives us a mnemonic device to discuss the discussions. Now, there's an interesting, just real quick, machloket here, whether this mnemonic device comes to go backwards to tell us the items that we've just discussed, or whether it normally, as is usually the case, I think, goes forward to tell us the issues that we're going to face, okay, over the next amud, daf, whatever. So our mnemonic device, siman, chitzona, okay, is the outright, atzma, itself, babayit, okay, the house, yichidai, an individual, ravina, right, ravina, delo, mishkach, bifnim. Right? All of those are part of the mnemonic device. Now, that's the first one is chitzona. Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Okay, chitzona, when we're referring now to the outer courtyard, right? Umay karula makom echad. What do we mean when we say there in one
place?
Makom hamiyuchad lishtehen. What we're referring to is a place that is unique, designated for the two of them. Let's go over Tanya Nami Haki, and we have a Braita, says that supports this view. Natnu eruvan b'chitzona, says the Braita. If they put, in other words, their joint eruv of the two courtyards were put in the outer one, v'shachach echad ben min hachitzona uvein min hapnimit, and one of the residents forgot to join the eruv, regardless of if he lived in the inner courtyard or the outer courtyard, or outer courtyard, inner courtyard, velo irev, and he did not join the eruv, shtehen asurot, according to this Braita. Residents of both courtyards are prohibited. Natnu eruvan b'pnimit, if the two courtyards joined in a single eruv and they put it in the inner courtyard, v'shachach echad min hapnimit v'lo irev, and a resident of the inner courtyard forgot and did not join the eruv, shtehen asurot. Again, we see that both of them are prohibited. However, the Braita continues, min hechitzona v'lo irev. But if a resident from the outer courtyard will say forgot and did not join the eruv, shtehen asurot. Again, the Braita says both of them are prohibited. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's the view of Rabbi Akiva. However, the Chachamim Omrim, but the sages say, Bazo, okay, in here, in this case, namely in the inner, regarding the inner courtyard, Pnimit Muteret V'chitzona Asura, that the inner courtyard is permitted, carrying, of course, V'chitzona Asura, and residents of the outer courtyard are prohibited. Amar le Rabba bar Hanan la'Abaye. And now Rabba bar Hanan claims to Abaye, Ma'ishna the Rabbanan, what's the difference regarding the rabbis, the Amrei Pnimit Muteret, that they say that the inner courtyard is permitted, right? Mishum da'achda dasha umishtamesh. Why? Because we say that they can close the door. Okay? Before we had the discussion of a partition, or here, we're saying that they can close the door and therefore utilize their courtyard. The Rabbi Akiva, says the Gemara, Nami tichad dasha v'tashmishin. Okay, so as regards to Rabbi Akiva's view, let's also suggest that the inner courtyard people can close the door and use it. And so why, therefore, does he say that somebody prohibited in that courtyard, okay, affects both? Amarle, he would say to you the following, all right? Or Amarle, they say to him, Eruv Maragle, right? The Rabbanan. We would say that Eruv is accustomed, okay, follows the basic view, okay, right, to the other one. Okay, in other words, here too, it could separate it. Nami, isn't that the case? Gemara answers, however, Eruv Margile, right? Okay, that what happens is that the people are accustomed, the residents of the inner courtyard are accustomed to utilizing the outer courtyard as a means of,
Getting to the Rosh Hashanah,
right, to get to the Reshus Harabim. The Amra, why? Because here, right, we can say as follows, right? The Tukine Shit Patich, all right? Shitaptich, okay? Then in other words, that they could argue you're improving their situation, velo la'avute, and not removing, deteriorating their situation. Okay? Think of the example, Zachim la'adam shelo befanav. Okay? That when you do a benefit for a person, it's acceptable, but nothing that you do to their detriment. Okay? So that's the argument, is that they could argue that that's the case. That by not closing the door, okay, they still have access through the outer courtyard to the Reshus Harabim. So the Gemara suggests the Rabbi Akiva, Nami Tema, the Tikune Shitaftich Velo La'avote. So in regards to Rabbi Akiva's view, let's also use that same concept and say you're improving their situation and not causing them to be something negative. The Amrala Mevatlinim Lach Reshute. Why? Because there they can say that they have relinquished their rights. Right? Varabanan, and it's according to the rabbis, right? Ein bitul reshut michatzer lechatzer. But according to the rabbis, you can't relinquish residents of one courtyard rights to residents of another courtyard. Okay? Lema, Shmuel v'Rabbi Yochanan beplugta de Rabbanan v'Rabbi Akiva kaidma fligei. Do we therefore say that the machloket between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan is similar to this machloket between the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer? I'm sorry, Rabbi Akiva. That's what they're arguing. Namely, the Shmuel Amar Karabanan, that we say Shmuel holds like the rabbis, Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Rabbi Akiva, and that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Akiva in this case. Okay? That therefore you could relinquish rights from one courtyard to another. Amar lach Shmuel. Okay, so Shmuel would answer you, Ana da Amre afilu Rabbi Akiva. Says, I can give you an answer and state my ruling even according to the view of Rabbi Akiva. Why? Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Akiva hacha. Up to this point, Rabbi Akiva didn't say this. Ela b'shtei chatzerot zo lifnei mizo. It only applied to a situation like here, where you have one inner courtyard, one outer courtyard. De asra nahadade. Why? Because there we can say that they can prohibit one another. Aval hatam, there in that other case, okay, where let's say you have courtyards next to each other. Mika asra nahadade. Do we say that they prohibit one another? Not necessarily. Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ana da Amrei Afilu Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan can argue, I can also state my ruling, even according to the view of allowing, relinquishing rights, okay, from one courtyard to another. Ad kan lo ka'amrei Rabbanan hacha. The rabbis only said that you can't relinquish rights. Ela da amra la adamet mevatelet li ka'asart alai. Okay? Okay. All right. In other words, and say to them, until you relinquish your rights to us, we're going to prohibit you. Okay? Aval hatam mi ka'asart ala. But in that case, is it possible for one courtyard to sort of demand, okay, say we're not going to let you do anything until you relinquish the rights? Is that doable? Now, that ended that particular argument. However, the Gemara continues now, okay, to look at the next part of the Mishnah. Okay? There were individuals living in each of the, one in the individual in the back courtyard, one in the front courtyard. V'im hayu shel yechidim. Okay? And if there were the individuals in the two chatzeros, right? Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Tani Rebbe taught, okay, the following. Hayu shlosha asurim. Okay? There were three residents. Okay? What happens? Then they would be prohibited one another. Only if there's two do they not have to join an Eruv, or would there be prohibitions? Amar laho Rav Bibi, says Rav Bibi, lo tatzitule, don't listen to him. Ana amrita mihaleh, I said it, okay, towards him. Umeshmei de Rav Ada bar Ahava amrita mihala. And I said it in the name of Rav Ada bar Ahava. Excuse me. Okay. Namely, Ho'il va'ani korei bohem rabim, since I would call that there were numerous, multiple residents, okay, b'chitzona, in the outer courtyard, all right? Okay, that is the issue, right? Namely that in order so that there not be a confusion as to whether it's prohibited or permitted to carry, okay? We're dealing with multiple residents in the courtyard. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Mare de Avraham, master of Abraham. Rabim berebi ichlifli. He says, I made a mistake and I confused the word Rabim, many, with the word Rebbe, okay, as to who was the teacher. Muel Amar, La'olam, Mutarot, Ad Shahiyu, Shnayim B'pnimit, Ve'echad B'chitzona. And Shmuel, however, disagrees with Rav Ada bar Ahava and says, actually, he said that in this case they're permitted until there are at least two residents in one courtyard and one resident in another. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar now is going to introduce a slightly new aspect. Sorry. Namely the following. Okay, Amar Rabbi Elazar. V'nachri harehu karabim. He says, and we have a situation where a lone Gentile, okay, could be one of the three residents, namely two Jews in one courtyard and one Gentile in the other. And therefore we say the Gentile is like multiple people. Mai Shna Yisrael Delo Asar asks the question then. Why is it that a single Jew doesn't prohibit another in the other courtyard? Deman diada yada. We say that because he knows that a Jew lives alone there, he knows that who lives there in that other courtyard. Uman delo yada, and if he didn't know, okay, that there was another Jew living there, savar iruve irev. Okay, he would make the assumption, okay, that they would join in an Eruv. So the Gemara raises the question now. Nachrinami amrinan. With a Gentile, couldn't we also say the following situation? Diyada yada, if he knows that there's a single Gentile living in that other courtyard, he knows. Delo yada, if he doesn't know, savar agire oger, he would, like the Jews, assume that they would rent from that Gentile. So the Gemara answers, stam nachre iita to oger mifa pai. Excuse me. That we say in general that an ordinary Gentile, if he does rent, okay, he would chatter about it. He would talk it up. Okay, that's the case. Now, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel concerning this issue of the two different courtyards. Asara batim ze lifnim mizeh. Let's say we have a situation that in one of the courtyards, okay, we have a situation of 10 houses, okay, one behind the other, okay. Pnimi notain et eruvo udio, he says, that the middle one, okay, the house in the middle, all right, the innermost house, has to contribute towards the Eruv, right? And that's sufficient. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu chitzon, even the outer, okay? And what do we mean by the outer? Okay, the outer one, okay, outer house. Chitzon beit sharhu. But wait a second, says the Gemara. Wouldn't the outermost house in that row be considered more like a gatehouse, right? For all of the others, okay? Okay, and we don't necessarily consider a gatehouse a real residence, and therefore we would argue that cannot be considered the necessity for anyone there to have to be part of the Eruv. Chitzon shel pnimi. No, what we're saying is the outermost one closest to the inner one. Okay, so it's the next to the last. Bamai kemiflage. What are they arguing about? Mar savar beit sha'ar diyachid shmei beit sha'ar. That one seems to say that the guardhouse of an individual is considered like a guardhouse, okay, and treated as a guardhouse. Umar savar lo shmei Beit Shar. And the other holds that it's not considered and treated like a guardhouse, okay, and therefore it still must be have its resident contribute to the Eruv. Okay, now another arrangement of houses. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Abuha. Amar Rab, in the name of Rab. Shnei Chatzerot. Okay, we have two Chatzerot, two courtyards. V'gimel Batim B'neihem. And we have three houses between them. Okay, look on 75b3. Okay, and we see the diagram opposite number 31. Okay, there's the three houses, house A, B, and C. Okay, we see two areas, Roman numeral 1 out one, Roman numeral 2 out the other. Okay, entrance. And then we have a building, okay, opposite each of those open courtyards, right? Excuse me. Ze ba derech ze, v'notein eruvo bazeh, v'ze ba derech ze, v'notein eruv bazeh, says our text, right? The people come through one and they put their eruv in the middle one, right? They put their eruv in the other, in the middle one, right? And they put it in the middle one, right? So in other words, C puts eruv in B, A puts eruv in B, and therefore B, number one, does not have to contribute foodstuffs to the eruv, but they can go all through the three houses, right? Just to finish up a tiny bit, v'zeh na'aseh beit sha'ar lezeh, and the outer house is considered a gatehouse towards one opening, v'zeh na'aseh beit sha'ar lezeh, and this is considered a gatehouse for the other opening. Emsa'i hava le beit bayit shemanichin bo eruv. Okay, and the middle house is considered the one where they place the eruv, the ein sarich litain et hapat, and they do not have to put bread towards the eruv there. That's where we're going to stop today. Tomorrow, hopefully, everybody will be able to follow up, okay, with a slightly new discussion in the Gemara, and then finish up the parak and start the new parak. Okay, so we'll wish everybody a good Shabbos and stay well.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Take care.
Okay.